The moment Admiral Vexthor heard the transmission, every eye stalk on his body stiffened in disbelief. He replayed it again just to be sure. The human ambassador's voice came through with brutal clarity, devoid of any diplomatic filter. "Touch our colony again and we'll rip your tentacles off and use them as jump ropes." Then silence. The line had gone dead and the room had frozen. Lieutenant Krill shifted uneasily beside him, his spindly legs clicking against the polished council floor. "That was the exact wording, sir," he confirmed, barely above a whisper. The Grand Council chamber of the galactic hegemony, normally a place of calm deliberation among the galaxy's oldest and most dominant powers, now hung in absolute silence. 7 of the most advanced species exchanged unsettled glances, some through pheromones, others through subtle shifts of light or telepathic waves, but all carried the same stunned message. Did humanity just declare war? Like that, Counselor Zix, a crystalline being from the Arcturan Dominion, finally broke the silence, his prismatic structure pulsing with ambient light. Perhaps this was a translation error. Surely no species is that brazen. "No translation error," rumbled Counselor Graff, the Petroian representative, an enormous rock-like creature whose kind had studied human languages in obsessive detail. They meant every word. Humans are literal. Even their threats have creative flair. Vexthor's tentacles coiled tight against his torso. "The Zalaxian Empire has conquered 3,000 star systems in the last millennium," he growled. "No one has ever dared speak to us like this. Over what? Some marginal outpost?" Krill hesitated before replying. "The humans call it New Montana, sir. They appear to have developed emotional ties to the place. They like the fishing." "Fishing," screeched Counselor Fepsilon of the Hive Collective, his insectoid limbs twitching in confusion. "They risk galactic war over aquatic sport." "It's more than that," Graff offered, his gravelly tones steady. "Humans bond with territory. They don't just inhabit places, they become part of them. Love them." That word love seemed to hit Vexthor like a tactical slug to the core. "What kind of evolutionary flaw is that?" "A deep one," Zix murmured, "and yet they've survived, somehow." The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered to life, revealing a view of Earth. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents, unremarkable by most galactic metrics. And yet, Grath's voice resonated low and ominous. "That planet is classified by its own people as a death world." The council stirred. Catastrophic weather, volcanic activity, frequent asteroid strikes, and over 8 million species, many hostile to humans, and yet they dominate. "They're not just surviving," Krill added quietly. "They're thriving, and they don't fear danger, they seek it. They climb mountains for fun. They jump out of planes. Some even chase storms." Vexthor's skin flushed a pale, sickly mauve. "You're saying they're insane?" "Absolutely," Krill said without hesitation. "But worse than that, they adapt." For the first time in centuries, the Council of Galactic Powers found itself not just puzzled, but deeply unsettled. A new variable had entered the cosmic equation, unruly, emotional, and fiercely protective of their own. Humanity had not asked for conflict, but in defending what they called home, they had just delivered a message loud enough to shake empires, and the galaxy had heard it. The chamber was still reeling when Counselor Graff spoke again, his deep, grinding voice resonating through the vaulted hall. "There's another layer to this. We need to consider how humans think." Admiral Vexthor tilted one eye stalk toward him wearily. "You mean the psych profile?" Graff nodded. "It's not just their technology or history that should concern us. It's their mindset. They approach danger differently from any species we've ever encountered." Lieutenant Krill cleared his throat, antennae twitching. "Our latest intelligence reports indicate that humans voluntarily engage in extreme risk behaviors, not for survival, for entertainment." "Examples?" Vexthor asked, though his tone made clear he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. They jump out of aircraft with nothing but a piece of fabric strapped to their backs, Krill said. They climb vertical rock faces with no safety gear. Some even chase storms, tornadoes, and electrical storms capable of obliterating structures. The Admiral's color shifted toward a nervous gray. Why? Because those things are there, Krill answered simply. That's what they say. Because it's there. Counselor Fepsilon's mandibles clicked rapidly in disbelief. That's not logical. No, Graf agreed, but it's human. And this irrational tendency is what makes them dangerous. Because they do not react the way we expect. They don't retreat when outmatched. They innovate. They experiment. And, most alarmingly, they enjoy the challenge. Are you suggesting they derive pleasure from near-death experiences? Dexter asked. Yes, Krill said grimly. They even have professions centered around it. Emergency responders, combat specialists, test pilots. They train for danger, then run toward it. Counselor Zick's crystalline structures shimmered uneasily. This level of recklessness defies survival logic. That's the paradox, Grath replied. Their recklessness is a survival advantage. The more they flirt with danger, the more they learn to master it. Their short lifespans force accelerated learning and cultural adaptation. They went from discovering flight to walking on their moon in under 100 of their years. Vextor was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. This kind of psychological volatility makes them unpredictable, unstable, unstoppable, Krill added. In their own way. The display in the center of the chamber shifted again, showing video clips from Earth. A human in fireproof gear pulling someone from a burning building. A soldier dragging a wounded comrade through gunfire. A mountaineer helping another climber ascend a sheer cliff with frozen fingers and a broken harness. They form powerful emotional bonds, Grath continued. Not just to territory, but to each other. They're tribal, protective, sacrificial. Then their aggression isn't purely instinctive, Fepsilon mused. No, said Zix, it's strategic. They're capable of immense violence, but it's often tied to a value system, ideals, loyalty, love, vengeance, even patriotism. And fishing, Krill added, half under his breath. Zix facets pulsed faintly. They are absurd creatures. Graf let out a low rumble, almost like laughter. And yet, they may be the most resilient beings in this part of the galaxy. Admiral Vexthor's tentacles twitched. So to summarize, we are dealing with an emotionally volatile, recklessly brave, and fiercely loyal species with a death wish and a talent for innovation. Yes, Admiral, Krill confirmed. And that, I believe, is why they scare us. For the first time in a long while, the Council of the Hegemony didn't speak as rulers, conquerors, or explorers. They sat as sentient beings who had just realized they might not be the apex of the stars after all. The council chamber dimmed as Graf activated the central holodisplay. A rotating image of Earth filled the air, its swirling clouds and glittering oceans casting pale reflections across the chamber walls. At first glance, Graf began, this world seems ordinary. Class M oxygen-rich atmosphere, moderate gravity, water abundance. Nothing to suggest it should birth a dominant species. Admiral Vexthor scoffed lightly, though the unease in his posture betrayed him. We've charted over 30,000 habitable worlds. There's nothing remarkable about this one. That's where you're wrong, Graf replied, tapping the console. The image shifted to highlight massive storm systems, hurricanes, typhoons, and planetary-scale weather disturbances. Earth is what its natives call a death world. A place so hostile that survival alone is an evolutionary gauntlet. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder as more data appeared. Volcanic zones, fault lines, polar ice, scorched deserts. Earth wasn't just unstable, it was furious. A planet constantly reshaping itself, punishing its inhabitants with every natural force imaginable. Catastrophic weather, Grath continued. Seismic activity, tectonic shifts, regular asteroid impacts, a wildly fluctuating climate. and over 8 million species, many of which evolved specifically to kill humans. Counselor Zix's crystalline form glimmered anxiously. And yet they remain the dominant species. Not just dominant, Grath said. They've tamed the land, the sea, even the air. They've built civilizations on fault lines, in hurricane zones, even in volcanic regions. Krill nodded. Our studies show that, historically, no natural threat has driven them to extinction. They've survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, global pandemics, even nuclear war, self-inflicted, I might add. Vexthor's color flushed pale. They detonated nuclear weapons on their own planet. Several times, Grath replied. And yet they persisted, adapted, learned. They're resourceful, Krill added. Earth's dangers forced them to evolve mentally, not just physically. They compensate for their biological limitations with innovation. They use intellect the way other species use claws or venom. Zix was silent, absorbing the implications. That explains their aggression. But it also explains their drive, their desperation to reach the stars. Exactly, Grath agreed. Their planet taught them nothing is guaranteed. Not food, not safety, not peace. So they reach outward. Not out of greed, but out of instinct. The image zoomed in on a lush forest, then panned across vast tundra and arid wastelands. In each biome, humans had not only survived, they had thrived. Built cities, raised families, fought wars. Rebuilt. Krill added, our psychological analysis indicates humans don't fear adversity. They expect it. Their legends, their history, even their religions are saturated with suffering overcome through willpower. They are warforged, Grath said simply. Tempered like steel. Admiral Vexthor leaned back slowly, tentacles twitching against his side. And we thought they were just soft-fleshed primitives. Because we saw their weaknesses, Krill replied, not their context. Zix's facets sparkled, his tone laced with something akin to respect. Perhaps we made the mistake of judging their strength by the calmness of their surface, rather than the storms they've survived. Grath nodded solemnly. Earth didn't make humans gentle, it made them dangerous, because they had to be. For a moment, no one spoke. The blue and green marble of Earth hung in silence above them, a beautiful lie that concealed a brutal truth. Humanity hadn't just survived its death world. They had mastered it. Admiral Vexthor had seen battle across hundreds of worlds, witnessed war unfold with calculated precision. But as the chamber lights dimmed and Counselor Grath cued the next set of data, even Vexthor felt a ripple of discomfort slither through his tentacles. These, Grath began, his voice grave, are human combat records, select engagements across their history from pre-spaceflight eras to modern conflicts. The holodisplay burst to life, a flood of grainy images and battlefield footage. Primitive humans charging through smoke and mud, naval fleets exchanging fire across stormy seas, urban ruins lit by gunfire. In each scene, humans fought not just with weapons, but with stubbornness. They have invented over 100 methods to kill each other before they even discovered electricity, Grath said. And that trend has only accelerated. Vexthor narrowed his eye stalks. Why would they glorify such brutality? Because for them, conflict is not always about conquest, Grath replied. It's about survival, identity, honor, and sometimes revenge. Krill stepped forward. They've weaponized everything from chemistry to sound waves. Even their communication networks double as instruments of warfare. The footage shifted, snipers cloaked in foliage, unmoving for hours, soldiers hiking through snow with weeks of supplies on their backs, special units maneuvering through dense jungle terrain with stealth that baffled even thermal sensors. They train for every environment, Grath explained. Desert, Arctic, forest, urban. Their armed forces adapt, improvise, and overcome obstacles even when cut off from command. Some of their operatives, Krill added, are capable of eliminating targets from distances beyond what their prey can even perceive. They call them snipers, and their patience is legendary. Counselor Fepsilon clicked his mandibles rapidly. But surely their technology is no match for ours quantum-based weapons, faster than light coordination, orbital strikes. That's the issue, Krill interrupted. They don't fight fair. Against overwhelming power, they go asymmetrical. Guerrilla warfare, sabotage, psychological operations, even suicide missions. Vexthor recoiled. You mean they willingly destroy themselves? Grath nodded. Their historical texts glorify such moments, what they call last stands. Stories where warriors faced impossible odds not to win, but to protect others or to make a statement. Zix leaned in, crystalline structure humming low. That kind of mindset, it's not weakness, it's power. A dangerous kind. The holodisplay shifted again, now showing diagrams of improvised explosive devices, unconventional ambushes, cyber attacks embedded in entertainment systems, and stealth drones fashioned from repurposed civilian tech. They turn their entire civilization into a battlefield if pushed, Krill said. And the worst part? They like the challenge. When overwhelmed, they don't surrender. They say. He hesitated. Go on, Vexthor urged. They say hold my beer. The chamber went still. Beer, Zix asked. A mild poison they consume recreationally, Grath explained. But the phrase means, watch me do something reckless, dangerous, and wildly improbable, just because I can. Vexthor's color shifted to an ashen gray. Are you telling me these creatures will answer a threat not with diplomacy, but with stunts? With creativity, Grath corrected. With spite, with precision, and sometimes with humor so dark it borders on madness. The Admiral said nothing. What could he say? Humanity wasn't just unpredictable. They were imaginative, and that made them terrifying. Not because they were stronger, but because they never stopped finding new ways to win. When Ambassador Frost entered the Galactic Council chamber, she didn't wait to be invited to speak. She walked straight to the table, calm and composed, her dark uniform crisp, bearing only a small Earth crescent wrapped in an olive branch. Let me be perfectly clear, she said, placing a compact projection device on the table's center. New Montana may be a backwater planet to you with lousy minerals and a slightly toxic atmosphere. But to us, it's home, and we will defend it. The device flickered to life, displaying real-time images of several Zalaxian mining outposts along the border of human space. Frost's tone didn't rise, but every word landed like a hammer. These facilities are under surveillance by individuals we refer to as special forces, she continued. Highly motivated people, very good at breaking things. If we don't reach an agreement in the next 24 hours, those outposts may experience a string of unfortunate accidents. Admiral Vexthor's eyes stalks quivered with rage. You're threatening us with terrorism? Frost smiled faintly, though anyone familiar with humans could tell it didn't reach her eyes. No, Admiral. I'm threatening you with consequences. The Council was stunned silent. No species had ever dared speak to the hegemony like this, not even the Petroians in their defiant prime. But Frost wasn't finished. She tapped the device again. The projection shifted, now zooming across Earth's solar system, stopping to highlight clusters of asteroids drifting lazily, seemingly harmless. These, Frost said, aren't just space rocks. They're automated weapons platforms, self-replicating, AI-controlled, hidden in plain sight, each programmed with one simple directive: if Earth goes dark, unleash hell on whoever's responsible. Gasps and color shifts rippled through the delegation. You're bluffing, Vexthor said, though even he didn't sound convinced. Frost shrugged. Maybe, but here's the thing about humans. Admiral, we're terrible gamblers. We bet big, we bet stupid. But we love games where the odds are stacked against us. She leaned forward, voice dropping just above a whisper. You're betting that a species crazy enough to strap themselves to explosives to reach orbit, who turned a science experiment into a planet-killing weapon within a decade of discovering atomic theory, is bluffing. Do you really want to make that bet? The chamber fell into heavy silence. Counselor Zix's facets dimmed, his voice nearly a whisper. What you describe is mutually assured destruction. Exactly, Frost replied. It's irrational, wasteful, paranoid, and extremely human. Vextor's posture wilted ever so slightly. His tentacles no longer flared in defiance, but curled close to his frame. You would end your own species to make a point? We've done it before, Frost said quietly. Nearly. More than once. But this time, we've planned for what comes next, and you're not ready for that. She stood, glancing briefly at the now silent chamber. Return our colony, compensate the families of those your occupation force killed, or be prepared to see how far we'll go to protect what's ours. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving behind a room full of beings that had just realized they weren't negotiating with a desperate young species. They were dealing with one that had prepared, in secret and in silence, for the worst-case scenario. And the worst-case scenario was them. Admiral Vextor didn't speak for several long seconds after Ambassador Frost left the chamber. The space where she had stood still felt charged like the ozone after a lightning strike. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they had just witnessed a diplomatic exchange or a declaration of dominance. Finally, Vextor exhaled a slow, shuddering breath. His tentacles drooped slightly, the color draining from his normally imperious hue. Full withdrawal, he muttered, almost too low for Krill to hear. Effective immediately. Approve the compensation packages. Krill hesitated. Yes, Admiral. Should I notify the Council? Do it quietly, Vextor replied, and double the compensation. I want no misunderstandings. That stunned Krill more than the human threat had. Double, sir. Vextor turned his gaze back to the now deactivated hologram of Earth. Lieutenant, begin compiling a comprehensive territorial analysis of all known and potential human colonies. I don't want us accidentally stepping into their space again. Yes, sir, Krill replied, his voice betraying a mix of disbelief and respect. That seems wise. As the delegates dispersed in a hushed, almost reverent silence, Counselor Grath approached the Admiral, his stone-like form radiating quiet gravity. If it's any consolation, he said, you're not the first to underestimate them. Vextor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, you've dealt with them before? Not directly, Grath rumbled, but my people have studied them for cycles, their contradictions, their instincts, their history. Vextor's eye stalks narrowed. And what's your conclusion? That they're terrifying, Grath said simply. But not just because they're capable of destruction. Because they're also capable of mercy. They form bonds. Even with enemies, they forgive. They remember. Remember. You're suggesting we ally with them? Vextor asked, incredulous. I'm suggesting, Grath replied, that being on the same side as a human when trouble comes is significantly more survivable than being on the opposite one. The Zelaxian Admiral remained silent, but deep in his mind, the idea took root. 2 weeks later, the unlikely alliance between Frost and Vextor took shape. The human ambassador boarded the Admiral's flagship, a gesture neither side took lightly. Surrounded by beings who, just weeks earlier, were prepared to subjugate her species, Frost walked the ship's corridors as if she owned the place. I appreciate the tour, Admiral, she said with that wry smile that unsettled Vextor more than he cared to admit. Your bioengineered systems are quite impressive. We have perfected organic integration over millennia, Vextor replied, attempting civility. Our ships are grown, not built. Frost nodded thoughtfully. We've dabbled in that. Still prefer steel and circuitry, but we're flexible when it counts. The Admiral's curiosity got the better of him. Your species has achieved partial biointegration. Frost met his gaze squarely. Admiral, has it occurred to you that we might not be showing you everything? That hit Vextor harder than any weapon. A realization unfurled slowly. Not only were the humans unpredictable, they were deliberately withholding. As she turned toward the viewport, watching stars drift by, she added, humans like to keep a few cards in hand, just in case. Vextor didn't respond. There was no need. because for the first time in his long career, he was no longer thinking about dominance. He was thinking about survival. Admiral Vexthor had never expected to feel this unsettled, least of all aboard his own flagship. Yet here he stood, watching Ambassador Frost sip what his sensors identified as a toxic stimulant humans called coffee, and speak to him as if she weren't surrounded by former enemies. "Your vessel is fascinating," she said casually, glancing around at the living walls and bioluminescent readouts. "Elegant, efficient, alien. We've experimented with organic tech, but never quite cracked it at this scale." The Admiral tilted his eye stalks, uncertain whether her tone carried admiration or subtle critique. "Your species favors machinery?" "We do," she answered, "but lately we've started blending systems mechanical with biological. Turns out, evolution doesn't always move in one direction." That caught him off guard. Your technological level did not suggest such integration. Frost's smile was thin. "Admiral, has it occurred to you that we're not showing you everything we have?" Vexthor's tentacles twitched. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed stirred a deep discomfort. "Humans conceal capabilities? We prepare," she said. "Hope for peace, design for war, and always hold something back just in case." She turned to face the stars beyond the viewport. "You've cataloged over 30,000 habitable worlds, haven't you?" 33,457, Vexthor replied automatically, a hint of pride coloring his tone. "And how many host intelligent life?" 187, he said. "All under hegemony observation and protection." "Like New Montana was," Frost said flatly. Vexthor's color darkened in embarrassment. She didn't wait for him to respond. "Do any of those species get a say in how they're protected?" "They are not ready," he said stiffly. "Who decides that? The Founding Council." Frost folded her arms. "So the powerful decide when the powerless deserve rights. Got it." Vexthor recoiled slightly at the implication. "You disagree? Humanity's history is filled with advanced powers making that decision for others," she said. "It usually ends in blood." They stood in silence for a moment before Vexthor asked, "How do your people reconcile such contradiction? You defend fishing colonies with military fury. You create weapons of mass destruction, and then cradle orphaned animals. You risk death for glory, yet share meals with strangers. What are you?" Frost laughed softly. "Contradictory, emotional, stubborn, efficient when it matters and wildly inefficient when it doesn't. We're explorers, warriors, poets, survivors." Vexthor's color shifted toward contented blue. "Grath suggested we could one day be allies. Do you believe that?" Frost asked. He paused. "I'm beginning to." She reached into her satchel and retrieved a data chip. "Earth's hosting a diplomatic conference next month. Neutral territory. Representatives from independent worlds. We'd like to invite the hegemony." Vexthor stiffened. An unexpected proposal. "You've spent centuries expanding," Frost said. "We've spent decades preparing. Maybe it's time to talk for real. We have no interest in galactic conquest, Admiral, but we will protect what's ours, and we'll make allies of anyone who shares our values. And those are self-determination, mutual respect, and the radical idea that being more advanced doesn't make you superior." She held his gaze. Vexthor didn't answer right away, but something in him shifted. Perhaps these humans weren't the threat he feared. Perhaps they were the opportunity he hadn't seen. The alert hit just as the conference reached a moment of calm. Ambassador Frost's secure communicator pulsed once priority signal. She excused herself with practiced poise and slipped into a side room aboard the diplomatic vessel Horizon. The encrypted transmission from Captain Rise crackled to life. "Tell me you found something," Frost said, voice low and urgent. Reyes didn't hesitate. "More than something. We found a conspiracy." As the captain laid out the details, an unauthorized facility hidden beneath the mountains of the Krell Reservation world, genetically modified Krell soldiers, and unmistakable evidence of hegemony officials operating alongside the enemy. Frost's expression hardened. She knew the moment the words Zalexian plasma cannons left Reyes's mouth that this wasn't just a rogue cell. This wasn't about disrupting the conference, Frost summarized grimly when Reyes finished. It was designed to fail just enough to spark war between Earth and the hegemony. Reyes nodded. They wanted us to strike first to make us the aggressors. Frost stared at the glowing display, the images of the secret base burning into her memory. And the official investigation team? Heading to the wrong coordinates, Reyes confirmed. By design, they'll find nothing. Frost rubbed her temple. Whoever's behind this is several steps ahead. We have evidence but no names, no faces at the top. And if we move too soon, they'll bury it all, Reyes said. And maybe us too. Frost cut the connection and stood in the silence. Every instinct told her to act immediately, but this wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about preserving a fragile path to peace. If she moved carelessly, she might lose both. She didn't get long to think. Ambassador, a voice came through her earpiece. Unusual activity detected aboard the Zalexian flagship. Energy spikes, communication bursts, but no weapons deployed. Monitor them, Frost said. No action unless they move first. Quietly bring our defense systems to standby. She returned to the main chamber just as the delegates began debating trade protocols. Admiral Vextor was missing, curious. Moments later, the doors opened and he entered, his colors cycling through uneasy shades of blue and violet. Without ceremony, he approached the Earth delegation and activated a private channel. Ambassador Frost, he said quietly, we need to speak. Now. She followed him into a secured meeting room. No aides, no guards. Your vessel deployed a stealth craft to the Krell reservation, Vextor said without preamble. We detected it departing just as the official team arrived. Frost didn't flinch. Yes, I did what I had to. Then you've seen what's down there. I have. The question is, why are you here telling me this instead of burying it like the rest of your people? Vextor's voice dropped to a near whisper. Because it's not a sanctioned operation. The expansionist faction has gone rogue. They've infiltrated the upper command structure, including my own fleet. If we go through official channels, the evidence disappears. Frost's eyes narrowed. So what are you proposing? A joint exposure, Vextor said, public, during the conference. Simultaneous detainments. We reveal the conspiracy together, neither of us acting alone. Frost studied him for a moment, reading the desperation behind his controlled tone. You're risking your career. Maybe your life. Yes, Vextor said. But if this faction succeeds, peace is dead, and Earth may not survive the storm they'll unleash next. Frost reached out and shook his hand. Well then, Admiral, she said quietly. Let's catch some traitors. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation as the delegates gathered for what was expected to be another tense debate on interstellar ethics. But as the proceedings prepared to begin, Ambassador Frost stepped forward and requested the floor. Distinguished representatives, she began, her tone calm but deliberate. Yesterday's attack was not what it seemed. Today you'll see the truth. The lights dimmed as a massive hologram flickered to life above the chamber footage captured by the human stealth drone. A hidden facility deep beneath the mountains of the Krell reservation world appeared, revealing advanced weapon systems, genetically altered Krell soldiers, and unmistakably hegemony officers directing it all. Gasps rippled through the room. Conversations broke into panicked murmurs. One delegate stood. What, shaking? What is this? Admiral Vextor rose beside Frost. It is a betrayal of our laws, our principles, our very identity as a governing body. This facility is unauthorized, and its operators are not acting under the hegemony's command. Several hegemony officials bolted to their feet, some clearly alarmed, others fuming. One Zalaxian counselor pointed a trembling tendril at Frost. This is fabricated. Earth seeks to divide us. Frost didn't flinch. Then explain these communications, she said. as another display illuminated intercepted transmissions orders from hegemony expansionist officers coordinating with the rogue base just days before the attack. Vextor's voice was stone. These are not allegations. They are facts, confirmed. And we know who gave the orders. Security teams moved quietly through the chamber, surrounding those who had already been identified as conspirators. Simultaneously, across the diplomatic fleet in orbit, joint task forces secured vessels, seized control systems, and detained additional agents. But just as the final wave of detentions began, a warning chimed through Frost's earpiece. Ambassador, the cruiser Dominant has powered shields and weapons. They're preparing to engage. Frost turned to Vextor. Your ship, your men. He responded without hesitation. Then I'll handle it. On a public channel, Earth's orbital defense grid activated, revealing weapons platforms that had remained cloaked until now. Their targeting systems locked onto the Dominant, surrounding it in a precise net of non-lethal firepower. Cruiser Dominant, came the voice of Commander Thompson from Earth's Defense Command. You are surrounded. Stand down or be disabled. A heartbeat passed, then another. Finally, the Dominant's energy signals faded. Shields dropped, weapons powered down. The chamber let out a collective breath. Frost stepped forward again. What you witnessed today was not just the unraveling of a conspiracy. It was a test, and together we passed it. Humanity and the loyal elements of the hegemony acted as one. Vextor joined her. For too long, we believed strength came from control, but perhaps true strength lies in accountability. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and dramatic. The expansionist faction was dismantled. Arrests were made. Investigations launched. The hegemony, once resistant to change, began rapid reforms. The Krill reservation system was dissolved. Genetic modifications were reversed. And a new interstellar governing body was proposed, one where independent worlds and Earth would share equal voice alongside hegemony powers. They called it the Galactic Cooperative. Ambassador Frost, now seen not as a disruptor but as a catalyst, worked closely with Admiral Vextor, her former adversary turned unexpected ally. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, one truth had become clear. The galaxy would no longer be ruled by fear but guided by cooperation. And humanity, once underestimated, had helped make it so. 2 months after the conspiracy was exposed and the expansionist threat neutralized, something extraordinary took place on the quiet shores of Lake Serenity on New Montana. It wasn't a summit or a battle, but a gathering, a celebration. Representatives from 28 different species, once strangers and rivals, now stood side by side, awkwardly holding customized fishing rods and squinting into the sunrise. Ambassador Frost stood near the waterline, watching Admiral Vextor struggle with his line. His tentacles twisted around the reel with deliberate care, though the motion clearly defied his species' instincts. This activity remains perplexing, Vextor said, his eye stalks tracking the water. The nutritional return does not justify the energy expenditure. Frost chuckled softly. That's because it's not about food, Admiral. He looked at her, puzzled. Then what is it about? She cast her own line with practiced ease, letting the silence answer for a few moments. Around them, other diplomats stood in various poses, some engaged in hushed conversations, others attempting to cast, some simply soaking in the stillness. It's about being present, Frost said eventually. About slowing down, finding peace, connecting with something older than ourselves. Counselor Grath, the stony Petroian, had proven surprisingly adept at the task. He sat still, rod balanced in his massive hands. Few activities encourage such patience, he murmured. There's clarity in it. Vextor turned back to the lake, eyes narrowing as his line twitched. And this world. This is what your people risked war to protect. Frost nodded. It's not special by galactic standards. Toxic atmosphere. Weak resource yields, but it's home. It's where children grow up, where families find meaning. It's not about what a planet offers. It's what people build on it that matters. He was quiet for a long moment. A remarkably inefficient basis for territorial claims. And yet, Frost smiled. We defended it. Not because it was valuable, but because it mattered. A sudden splash broke the moment. Frost's rod bent sharply as something tugged hard from beneath the surface. With practiced control, she reeled it in a shimmering, multicolored trout twisting in the air. She held it up proudly. Montana rainbow trout. Beautiful, isn't it? Vexthor blinked. You intend to consume it now? Frost laughed, removing the hook gently before releasing the fish back into the water. No, the catch was the point, not the keeping. The Admiral's tentacles twitched in confusion. You expended effort to capture the creature, only to let it go. Exactly. Vexthor tilted his head slightly. Fascinating inefficiency. But this time, there was no judgment in his voice, only quiet curiosity. As the sun crept higher, Counselor Zix unveiled a crystalline sculpture in the gathering hall behind them, an artwork designed to be viewed differently, depending on the observer's physiology. From one angle, it represented cooperation. From another, unity. From yet another, resilience. It is called convergent evolution, Zix explained. It reminds us that from different paths, we arrive at the same place. Frost stood before the sculpture, surrounded by beings who, only months ago, had questioned her presence in the galaxy. We may be inefficient, contradictory, even reckless, she said. But we're also stubborn, creative, and loyal to what we love. That's what brought us here. That's what built this moment. Vexthor glanced around at the laughter, the awkward casting attempts, the shared smiles between species. And for the first time, he understood. The galaxy didn't just change because of humanity's weapons. It changed because of their heart. The sun had barely risen over Lake Serenity, but the shoreline was already lined with diplomats, some wrapped in environmental suits, others shaded by adaptive canopies, awkwardly holding modified fishing rods. It was a surreal sight. Crystalline beings, silicon-based life forms, and humanoids all standing together in mutual silence, casting lines into the shimmering water of a human colony once nearly lost to war. Ambassador Frost watched them with a quiet smile. Beside her, Admiral Vexthor adjusted the grip of his bioengineered casting device, his tentacles coiling with determined focus. I still fail to grasp the significance of this ritual, he admitted as his line splashed a few meters short of its target. The nutritional yield of these creatures is negligible compared to the energy expended. That's because it's not about the yield, Frost said, casting her line smoothly across the lake. It's about the experience, the stillness, the connection to something peaceful. Something we've all been fighting to protect. Counselor Grath, seated like an immovable boulder on a nearby rock, rumbled in agreement. This activity suits my kind well. Few tasks reward patience and presence so consistently. Frost chuckled. Told you fishing was universal. Vexthor observed the water, watching as the sun painted gold streaks across the ripples. This world, he said, still seems ordinary. I struggle to understand why your species nearly went to war for it. Frost glanced at him. Because it's home. Because families live here. Because people fell in love here. Not every battle is fought over strategic value or rare minerals. Sometimes we fight for places that hold meaning. A remarkably inefficient form of attachment, Vexthor murmured. Maybe, she replied. But inefficiency doesn't mean insignificance. Nearby, an insectoid delegate squealed with surprise as their line caught a fish. Their aide clapped excitedly while a Zalaxian representative looked on, tentacles twitching in something close to amusement. Across the lake, others laughed, conversed, or stood in thoughtful silence. This, Frost said softly, is why we defended New Montana. It wasn't just a colony. It was a promise to ourselves, to our people, that we wouldn't let anyone take our peace without a fight. You caught that fish, Vexthor noted as she reeled one and moments later, only to release it again. Exactly. He tilted an eye stalk toward her. You do things simply because they matter to you, regardless of outcome. That's humanity in a nutshell, Frost said. We protect what we love, even when it doesn't make sense to others. He looked out over the lake, then slowly lowered his rod. You have reshaped this galaxy, not with fleets, not with firepower, but with stubbornness, with conviction, and with this. The Arcturan delegation unveiled their parting gift soon after, a crystalline sculpture titled Convergent Evolution. It showed all the species of the conference, their unique forms linked by glowing threads, each strand representing their shared future. Frost stepped forward to address the gathered representatives. We don't always make sense. We're not the strongest or the wisest, but we show up. We fight for what matters. We love hard, forgive slow, and never back down when it counts. And that, Vexthor added, stepping beside her, may be the most powerful force the galaxy has ever seen. The ceremony ended with shared laughter, clumsy handshakes, and 1,000 new memories. And as the diplomats cast their final lines into the lake, they did so not as enemies or strangers. The morning mist hung low over Lake Serenity, veiling the calm water in a soft golden haze. Along the banks, a strange assortment of figures stood in silence. Some were cloaked in protective suits to shield against Earth's atmosphere. Others moved with the awkward stiffness of non-terrestrial anatomy, yet all held modified fishing rods, quietly waiting. Admiral Vexthor stood among them, his tentacles gently adjusting his grip as he tried, once again, to cast his line toward the water. The lure plopped unceremoniously a few meters short. The purpose of this activity still eludes me, he said aloud, eye stalks tracking the motion of the sunlit waves. The creatures are of negligible nutritional value, and the effort invested seems excessive. Ambassador Frost, just to his right, smiled as she reeled in her own line slowly. Because it was never about the catch. Vexthor tilted his gaze toward her. Then, what is it about? She gestured broadly to the quiet shoreline where beings from across the galaxies, Elaxians, Petroians, Arcturans, insectoids, crystalline entities, stood side by side in peaceful contemplation. It's about this. Connection, reflection, the stillness of a shared experience. No politics, no agendas, just being. Counselor Grath, motionless on a stone bench, rumbled in agreement. It's the closest thing I've found to meditation among your species. Even the stones beneath my feet seem quieter here. Vexthor considered that. The air was thick with silence, not the tense quiet of a battlefield or negotiation table, but the kind that invited peace, healing, understanding. And this is why you were willing to risk galactic war, he asked. For a place like this? Frost nodded slowly. New Montana wasn't just another colony. It was home to people who wanted to live in peace, to raise children, to fish. When someone threatens that, we don't calculate risk. We defend it. Even when outmatched, he asked. Especially then, she replied, because some things are worth losing everything for. Vexthor's tentacles twitched thoughtfully. Your kind does not think like others. No, Frost said softly. We don't. A few meters away, a human child, one of the colonists, handed a fishing pole to an Arcturan representative. The crystalline figure accepted it with cautious reverence, the rod nearly slipping through their refracting limbs. Laughter rippled through the onlookers. That laughter, Vexthor realized, was the real reason Earth had changed the galaxy. Not their weapons, not their boldness, but their ability to create bonds between species, between enemies, between strangers who didn't yet understand each other. Later that afternoon, a simple ceremony was held beneath a grove of rustling earth trees. 6 of the Arcturans unveiled a new sculpture, a shimmering lattice of light and crystal, its form ever-changing depending on the angle of view. It is called perspective, Zix explained. It requires all species to appreciate its full beauty. Alone, no one can see the complete picture. But together, Frost thought, we rebuild. She stepped forward to address the assembly one last time. We started this journey because someone tried to take something from us. But we finish it by choosing to share something greater. unity, trust, a future we can build together. Vexthor joined her, his voice steady. Let this world be a symbol, not of conquest or conflict, but of understanding. As the crowd applauded and the sun dipped low, casting fire across the lake's surface, the diplomats cast their final lines into the water. A simple act, shared across species, a gesture of peace that would echo through the stars for generations. As the last lines were cast into the glassy waters of Lake Serenity, the quiet murmur of voices faded into a peaceful hush. The diplomats stood side by side, some towering and crystalline, others hunched and insectoid, each lost in their own thoughts. There were no speeches now, no formal declarations. Only the rhythmic lapping of the lake against the rocks and the occasional splash of a curious fish. Ambassador Frost watched it all with quiet pride. 2 months ago, these species hadn't even been able to sit in the same room without suspicion. Now, they fished together. Admiral Vexthor reeled in his lines slowly, his posture more relaxed than Frost had ever seen. I must admit, he said, this ritual, however inefficient, carries an unexpected resonance. That's how it starts, she replied with a grin. First the fishing, then the friendships, then the hard questions. He tilted an eye stalk at her. You mean the ones about how we let ourselves get so far apart before realizing we had more in common than we thought? Frost nodded. Exactly. Behind them, preparations were underway for the final ceremony of the summit. Delegates from all 28 attending species had contributed something, an artifact, a story, a symbol of shared culture. But the centerpiece was something different entirely. The Arcturans unveiled it with a dramatic flourish, a sculpture titled Convergent Evolution. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, constructed from native materials gathered from each participating world. Each piece represented a species, and each strand of the luminous weave that connected them symbolized cooperation, compromise, and trust. Zix, the Arcturan artisan behind the creation, addressed the gathering. This structure can only be appreciated fully when viewed from every angle. No one perspective captures the whole. Only together can the sculpture be understood. There was silence. Then applause, slow at first, then building into a standing ovation that echoed through the trees. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Vexthor approached Frost. It still amazes me that this all began because your people refused to surrender a fishing colony. It wasn't about the fish, she said. It was about choice, about self-determination, about not letting someone else decide what mattered to us. And now, he said, the entire galaxy has to reckon with that choice. Frost shrugged. We didn't plan to lead anything. We just refused to be silent. And in doing so, Vexthor replied, you reminded us of something we had forgotten, what it means to stand for something. The following week, the Galactic Cooperative was officially ratified. New Montana was recognized not just as a sovereign human colony, but as the symbolic birthplace of a new age of diplomacy. The Krell were granted their own seat at the table, and even the once expansionist factions of the hegemony found themselves re-examining their assumptions. Back on Earth, headlines called it the peace that began with a rod and reel. But Frost knew it wasn't about fishing. It was about people of all kinds choosing peace over power, cooperation over conquest. She stood once more on the lake's edge, the water calm, her line drifting out across the surface. Behind her, laughter echoed from different voices, alien and human alike. And in that quiet moment, as the galaxy moved forward from war into a fragile, hopeful unity, Frost understood. Sometimes, history doesn't begin with a war cry. Sometimes it begins with a cast. The final day on New Montana felt less like the end of a conference and more like the closing chapter of a story no one had expected to be written. Where once suspicion and standoffishness had defined interspecies diplomacy, now laughter and shared meals echoed along the lakefront. What had started as an unprecedented gathering of wary diplomats had evolved into something else entirely, something no treaty could manufacture: connection. Admiral Vexthor stood beside Ambassador Frost near the water's edge, still holding the fishing rod with a combination of awkwardness and pride. He glanced at the lake. then at the humans teaching a Petroian child how to skip stones. "I must admit," he said, "your species is difficult to categorize." "Good," Frost said with a grin. "We work hard at being hard to define." Vextor turned slightly. "You're warriors, yes, but also poets. You're emotionally volatile, yet capable of astonishing patience. You waste energy on rituals that serve no measurable purpose, yet somehow, those rituals build alliances faster than decades of diplomacy." Frost cast her line lazily. "We're full of contradictions, but they're not flaws. They're tools, parts of the whole. We're not always efficient, but we're rarely indifferent. Your people risked everything for a planet most would consider unremarkable," Vextor said, eye stalks scanning the horizon. "And now the galaxy meets here to fish. To heal," Frost corrected softly. New Montana became a symbol. Not because it was powerful, but because we proved that peace can be protected as fiercely as territory. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then, his tentacles shifted into a new gesture Frost had never seen before, slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. "What was that?" she asked. "A gesture from ancient Zalaxian culture," Vextor explained. "Rarely used. It means respect." Frost blinked, genuinely surprised. "You've taught us something we had forgotten," he said. "That leadership isn't always about control. That peace doesn't come from superiority. It comes from courage, from choosing not to strike first, from defending not what is valuable but what is meaningful." At that moment, Commander Thompson approached. "Ambassador, the Arcturans would like to present a final gift before departure." In the gathering hall, Counselor Zik stood proudly beside a new display, a rotating hologram, constantly shifting based on the viewer's angle and species-specific perception. It was called Harmony, in contrast. "This structure reflects each of our species' contributions," Zix explained. "But no single perspective shows the full image. Only when all of us observe together does the complete picture emerge." Frost stepped forward, emotion stirring in her voice. "This is what humanity has always believed, that our differences aren't problems to solve, they're pieces of something larger." Across the chamber, a dozen species stood shoulder to shoulder, unified not by politics or treaties, but by shared experience. Some were former enemies, some newly discovered allies. Now part of something greater. After the ceremony, as vessels began departing New Montana's orbit one by one, Vextor lingered on the lakeshore with Frost. "This world," he said, "will be remembered for more than its waters." "It already is," she replied. He nodded slowly. "I once believed strength came only through dominance. Now I see. Perhaps the strongest are those who can stand together even when they don't have to." Frost smiled. "That's the human way." And with that, they watched the last sunbeam vanish over the lake's surface, marking not just the end of an era, but the beginning of something even greater.